Hello and welcome to WBZ and CBSN Boston's continuing coverage of the Boston mayoral race. On September 14th, a nonpartisan preliminary election will narrow the field of candidates to two. WBZ TV and CBSN Boston are providing voters with a chance to directly compare the candidates' responses to four questions on issues you've said in poll after poll are most important to you. In this segment, we welcome Boston City Councilor Andrea Campbell. Councilor, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the city's housing crisis, issue number one in every poll.
That's right.
Where even large infusions of public money and pressure on developers over the years just hasn't yielded nearly enough affordable housing to meet the demand. Now, a Brookings Institution study released last fall identified as a major problem, quote, exclusionary zoning by affluent, mostly white communities, exacerbating racial and economic segregation in the region, limiting Black and Latino or Hispanic families' access to high opportunity communities, end quote. So it seems Chapter 40B, the state affordable housing law aimed at mitigating exclusionary zoning, isn't getting the job done. So what will you do as mayor to push suburban communities and Beacon Hill to help fix this problem?
Well, one, it is a regional issue. If we're going to solve the issues of housing affordability, we should work, of course, across the region. But there are immediate things the city of Boston can do to ensure that this city is not the most expensive city to live in and that it truly is affordable. And I put out a robust plan on how to do just that, building upon my record as a city councilor. My first piece of legislation was a Community Preservation Act. It's generating $20 million every single year, including for the creation of more affordable housing. I would push the state to increase that match for that program. I started the vacant lot initiative in the city of Boston, where we are activating city-owned land for housing purposes and homeownership opportunities. I've committed to activating at least 100 lots within my first 100 days as mayor. And then we need to get creative and intentional. We need to build more housing at pricing points that people can afford. We need to be more intentional about building more housing for our veterans, our seniors, and families, and not just rental opportunities, but homeownership opportunities as well.
So just to follow up, do you see yourself as mayor lobbying Beacon Hill to toughen up Chapter 40B?
Yes, that's one role. That's one role, of course, the city of Boston and the mayor's office has to play. But I want to stress to voters that there are a whole host of tools in our toolkit at the city level, within our control and power, to ensure that every single resident in the city of Boston has access to a homeownership opportunity and an affordable rental opportunity, and that those who are dealing with homelessness don't continue to have to grapple with that. We have everything it would take to be able to close these gaps in the city of Boston.
Councilor, this year, the city is spending millions of dollars on a marketing campaign to persuade outsiders that Boston is, quote, all-inclusive, an explicit effort to counter the nagging image of the city as a racially unwelcoming environment. Does that message match the reality of life here for people of color? And if not, what do you intend to do about that beyond this ad campaign?
We are indeed a world-class international city, and I have been stressing that. Obviously, folks come here from around the world to go to our higher ed institutions to, of course, get medical research and other things done at our medical institutions. The list is long where the city of Boston is number one. But I also stress there's a flip side. By certain metrics, we are one of the most unequal cities in the country. And my personal story is an example of the sort of tale of two cities. On the one hand, a poor girl from Roxbury could get everything that you would need to make it to a Princeton University and to be successful. This city gave me everything. On the other hand, my twin brother dies while in the custody of a state prison. This city did not work for him. And so when I jumped into the mayor's race in September, I stressed we can continue to be a world-class city while closing the gaps in the inequities in housing, in our education system, the racial wealth gap, and our parks, access to parks, transportation, you name it. That work lies ahead. And the only way we do it is if we work across every neighborhood and work in collaboration. And I'm confident the city of Boston can get rid of that reputation and truly be an inclusive and equitable city for everyone.
Last time we checked, Boston's METGO program, which buses more than 3,000 children of color to suburban schools, had a waiting list of 15,000 families. There are thousands more on waiting lists to get into the city's charter schools. These families obviously want urgently an alternative to the conventional public schools. What, if anything, will you do for them as mayor?
I'm a product of Boston Public Schools. I went to 5 of them. All 5 of my schools, including Boston Latin School, were excellent. And so I stress that because we know it is possible for Boston Public Schools to deliver a high quality, excellent education to every student in the city of Boston. And right now, this system doesn't do that. It fails everyone. It's the luck of the lottery, right? You're lucky if you get a pre-K seat. You're lucky if you get a good elementary school, middle school, and high school. And I often stress that as a mother of 2 boys living in Mattapan, I have a 5% chance of getting my boys into a high quality Boston public school compared to some downtown neighborhoods where it's 80%. All of these inequities can be closed. I put out a plan 3 years ago called Action for Boston Children, keyword action, stressing that there are ways in which to close these gaps. It's one of the reasons I jumped into the mayor's race in September, because of the inaction on closing these gaps. So I would dust off my plan from 3 years ago, expand upon it to ensure that every family had access to an excellent Boston public school education so they don't have to choose another system. And that's critically important. Every family wants to go to Boston Public Schools. And until we get that right, they will choose something else, but they shouldn't have to in the city of Boston.
In the meantime, how about more charter school seats?
Right now, that's not my focus. The focus is, and it will be as mayor, to ensure that Boston Public Schools is excellent so that our families don't have to go to a METCO school program, a charter school, or if they're low income, fight for a scholarship to a parochial school or private school. We have everything it would take in the city of Boston to ensure that Boston Public Schools is actually delivering the excellent education that every family deserves and is entitled to.
Okay, finally, let's turn to public safety. This year is the 25th anniversary of the birth of Boston's Operation Ceasefire, otherwise known as the Boston Miracle. That was an innovative effort to reverse an epidemic of deadly gun violence based on unprecedented cooperation between Boston police, federal, state, and county law enforcement, street workers, and clergy. For years, it was a national model, then it fell apart. Do you understand why it fell apart? What will you do to fix it, or do you prefer an alternate model to the Boston Miracle?
I think the Boston Miracle is one example of the creative, community-based solutions to addressing gun violence in the city of Boston. I'm really proud of my public safety plan. It was vetted and reviewed by officers within our department, retired officers, our district attorney, Suffolk County Sheriff Steve Tompkins, so many others, including residents. And it's the most comprehensive and specific plan of any candidate in this race. And it's twofold. One, it says we need to restructure our police department so that every single neighborhood has an adequate number of officers actually walking the beat, engaging in community policing as a way, of course, to reduce incidents of violence in the community. But the second piece of my plan is just as important. It says when we actually restructure our department, we will save millions of dollars, reining in a very absorbent $400 million police budget, $70 million overtime budget. We will rein in those costs by that restructuring. And then what can we do with those resources? We can redirect them to the root causes of violence and to some of these creative community-based solutions, and respond, of course, by investing in jobs, moving people out of poverty, mental health, trauma, including substance use disorder, which we know is on full display at the intersection of Mass and Cass, where the city of Boston absolutely needs to do more work with respect to that issue too.
Do you have any thoughts on what went south with the Boston Miracle Coalition?
I hear different stories and accounts, but what I do hear about what we do going forward is that we need to, as a city of Boston, invest in community-based organizations. And we're actually doing the work of removing guns off the street, who are actually doing the work of getting folks who are living the life of committing crime to stop doing that and to choose different lifestyles and alternatives. The city of Boston cannot do that on its own. It really needs to invest in folks in the communities who are doing the work. And in order to do that, we need to free up resources in our own budget to make those investments.
Counselor, before I ask you to sort of tease your website and how people can find out more about you, I just want to note to viewers that the sign over your right shoulder indicating the number of days till the election was accurate on the day we recorded this. But by the time you're watching it, it's going to be fewer days. So please, it's September 14th that the preliminary election is. Where do people go to find out more about the Campbell campaign?
AndreaCampbell.org. And of course, I hope to earn the vote of supporters in the city of Boston.
Thank you for your time today, Counselor, and thank you all for watching. Please explore this website further. Click on the interviews with the other candidates as they address these very same questions. And of course, the most important thing, get out and vote on September 14th, then watch your vote count with our coverage here on WBZ TV and CBSN Boston. Thanks so much for watching.